Welcome to another episode of the Bovine Podcast, where we dive deep into the latest trends, breakthroughs, and controversies shaping the global dairy industry. Today, we're unpacking the highlights from this past week's genetic evaluations. From reshuffled rankings to fertility triumphs and inbreeding alarms, there's a lot to digest. So grab your coffee, or better yet, your milk, and let's get started. First up, let's talk about the top 100 TPI sires for April 2025. The big story here is the genetic base change, a recalibration that's shaking up rankings across the board. Genosource Captain ET holds strong at number 1 with an impressive 3441G TPI, despite recalibrated production trait values. Meanwhile, SDG Cap Garza ET keeps his solid number 2 spot. But it's not all stability. There's been significant movement in the rest of the top 10. For example, S-Gen Cowan Thorson E climbed to number 3 with a TPI of 3389, while Plain Knoll Renegade Trooper dropped from number 3 to number 8 despite gaining points. The recalibration isn't just about rankings, it's reshaping how we interpret production traits. Milk production values saw numerical decreases across the board, but don't be fooled. These adjustments reflect statistical resets rather than diminished genetic potential. Breeders should focus on relative rankings rather than absolute numbers as they plan their next moves.
Well, hello there and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into the Holstein genetic evaluations from April 2025. And, well, trust me, this isn't just another quarterly update. We're talking about a major shakeup, a real recalibration of the genetic landscape thanks to a significant base change. It's like someone decided our genetic ruler needed a whole new set of markings, and the dairy world is definitely taking notice.
That's absolutely right. For everyone tuning in, the dairy farmers, the breeders, the industry folks who live and breed these numbers, this deep dive is all about unpacking what this base change means for your breeding decisions and, ultimately your profitability.
Yeah.
We know you're busy, so our goal isn't to drown you in statistics, but to really illuminate the practical implications of these shifts.
And, when you say shifts, we mean significant ones. Predicted transmitting abilities, those PTAs we rely on so heavily, have been slashed across the board. We're talking upwards of 20% in some cases.
Wow.
For Holstein specifically, the average drops are around 750 pounds of milk, 45 pounds of fat, and 30 pounds of protein. Now, we know that might look like a pretty dramatic downturn on paper, enough to make you spill your coffee, maybe.
Right.
But there's a really important reason behind this, and by the time we're done here, you'll have a much clearer understanding of what's going on and what truly matters moving forward.
Exactly. And to navigate this new terrain effectively, the key concept to wrap your head around is relative genetic merit. Even with these big numerical adjustments, the truly elite animals, the top-tier bulls, have largely maintained their positions at the peak. That's a crucial piece of the puzzle, and it's what we'll be digging into today.
Okay, let's unpack this big genetic base change then. What exactly is it, and, why did it happen now?
Okay, so think of a genetic base change like resetting the average. We're essentially recalibrating all the genetic values so that the average genetic merit of Holstein cows born in 2020 becomes our new 0 point. It's like re-anchoring our measurements to a more current population. The base year of 2020 was chosen to reflect the genetic merit of the current milking population more accurately.
Right.
As genetic progress steadily marches on, the average genetic value of the breed naturally increases. So resetting the baseline helps us to see the current top animals more clearly when compared against a contemporary standard rather than, against a population from decades ago.
So it's a statistical adjustment, right? To keep things in perspective, not a sign that our Holsteins have suddenly become less genetically gifted. That's a really crucial distinction because those initial numbers could definitely, raise some eyebrows in the barn.
Precisely. That's the key point. The inherent genetic potential within these animals hasn't shrunk overnight. What's changed is the yardstick we're using to measure and compare that potential.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, the numerical changes, particularly for those fundamental production traits like milk, fat, and protein, are substantial. It's vital to recognize that this isn't isolated to a few animals. It's a widespread statistical recalibration affecting the entire Holstein breed.
Right. Now, despite these pretty significant number crunching exercises. We're hearing that the cream of the crop, those elite bulls, have by and large held on to their top spots. That might seem a little counterintuitive. How does that work?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how relative genetic merit shines through. While the absolute PTA values have indeed come down across the board due to this base change, the relative differences in genetic merit between the highest-ranking bulls and the average of the breed have remained remarkably consistent. Take RIPCORD, for example. He's still commanding the top spot with a GTPI of 3537. And right on his heels is DARTH VADR at 3504. Their actual numerical values have certainly been adjusted downwards, but their position of superiority relative to the overall Holstein population is largely unchanged.
You've got some specific examples to illustrate this, right? Someone like Genosaurus captainet, a name many of our listeners will definitely recognize. What kind of numerical shift did he experience?
Exactly. Genosaurus captainet actually saw his TPI nudge upwards slightly from 3336 to 3441.
Yeah.
Now, on the surface, that might look like a positive jump, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
But his milk PTA took a significant dip from a hefty 2,542 pounds down to a still respectable 1,872. We also saw numerical decreases in his PTAT, udder and posit, and productive life. PTAT went from 1.01 to 0.28, UDC from 1.65 to 0.83, and productive life from 5.0 down to 3.7.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, it's absolutely critical to reiterate, this doesn't imply that Captain suddenly became a less valuable genetic asset. It simply reflects the new baseline. His genetic advantage relative to the current Holstein population remains strong, which is why he continues to be a leading proven sire.
So if I'm understanding this correctly then, some bulls might have even gained a few TPI points numerically, but still seen their overall ranking in the breed slip slightly, while others managed to hold steady or even climb the ranks, despite the general downward pressure on PTA values. That really underscores the importance of focusing on those relative shifts in position, doesn't it? It's not just about the raw numbers anymore.
Precisely. You hit the nail on the head. The base change has essentially dealt us all a new hand, and understanding where each bull now sits in this new ranking order is absolutely paramount for making informed breeding decisions. Some bulls who were perhaps extreme outliers for certain traits might have experienced a more pronounced adjustment, potentially leading to a change in their overall position, even if their fundamental genetic merit remains high.
All right, let's dive into those GTPI frontrunners in a bit more detail. You mentioned RIPCORD, ABA-JZ, DARTH VADR, and Watchman as the bulls currently sitting in the top 5 spots. What are the key strengths and, the standout PTA figures that contribute to their lofty rankings in this new evaluation?
Okay, so leading the charge, as we've already mentioned, is RIPCORD, boasting that impressive 3537 GTPI. His real strength lies in his remarkably well-balanced profile. He brings a significant amount to the table in terms of milk production. We're looking at 1,496 pounds coupled with excellent fat production at 126 pounds and a solid 62 pounds of protein. He's really a true all-around genetic powerhouse.
And what about AB, who's right on his heels in that number 2 spot? What's his story?
AB, with a GTPI of 3526, truly shines when it comes to those crucial component percentages. He boasts an exceptional 0.34% for fat and 0.11% for protein. In today's economic climate where milk component pricing plays such a vital role in profitability, that's a really significant advantage for producers.
Absolutely. Then we have JZ and DARTH VADR, both comfortably above that 3,500 GTPI threshold. What are the defining characteristics that set them apart?
Well, JZ clocks in with a GTPI of 3506 and offers a very compelling overall package of desirable traits, just solid across the board. DARTH VADR at 3504 GTPI is particularly noteworthy for his outstanding milk production. He's putting up an impressive 2,228 pounds of milk, which is actually the highest milk yield among these current top 5 GTPI sires.
That's a lot of milk. And rounding out that elite top tier is Watchman. What makes him a standout in this competitive group?
Watchman, with a GTPI of 3,499, offers a really attractive combination of robust production figures and truly exceptional health-related traits. His health index of 8.7 is particularly noteworthy, indicating a strong genetic predisposition for healthier and less problematic daughters.
Valuable.
Yeah, that's something that can have a real impact on long-term farm efficiency.
You also highlighted some leading proven sires. For those of our listeners who, prefer to rely on data from actual milking daughters, who are the top contenders in the proven bull category right now.
Right. On the proven side, Genosaurus captainet, as we've already discussed, maintains the top spot with a GTPI of 3441G. Following closely behind him is SDG Cap Garza 8 at 3418.
Yeah.
And Stetchen Kellen Thorsen-Et has emerged as a strong number 3 contender with a GTPI of 3D389.
Okay.
These bulls have already demonstrated their genetic merit through the performance of their daughters in, real-world conditions, providing that added layer of confidence for some breeders.
Now, while GTPI is a fantastic overall index to consider, for many commercial dairy producers, the bottom line really comes down to dollars and cents, right? So let's shift our focus a bit to the net merit champions. Who's leading the way in terms of projected economic efficiency in this new evaluation?
Yeah, good point. When we talk about net merit dollars, that's NMDO, DARTH VADR actually takes the crown there with an impressive $1,270.
Oh, wow.
Right behind him in terms of projected lifetime profitability are RIPCORD at $1,239 and Endurance at $1,222. These are the bulls that the numbers suggest will generate the most economic value in commercial dairy herds under current market conditions.
What specific combinations of traits are driving those high NML values for these top economic contenders? Is it just milk or?
Well, for DARTH VADR, it's that powerful combination of very high milk production again, exceeding 2,200 pounds, coupled with excellent component values at 145 pounds of fat and 69 pounds of protein. Endurance, on the other hand, really shines when it comes to component percentages, boasting a superior 0.35% for fat while still maintaining solid milk production.
Okay.
And RIPCORD, as we observed for this GTPI, offers that excellent all-around balance across a range of economically important traits, including a strong productive life of 4.5 and a respectable fertility index of 1.7.
It's really interesting to see that strong correlation between high TPI and high net merit. It suggests that the overall genetic merit, as captured by TPI, is indeed aligning pretty well with projected economic efficiency in these April evaluations. And I understand there have been some significant shifts in how net merit itself is calculated, right?
That's a critically important point for our listeners to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yes. The updated NMO formula now places a significantly greater emphasis on certain key traits. The weighting for fat production has increased by 13%. The emphasis on feed efficiency has seen a substantial jump of 41%.
41%.
Yeah, big jump. And the weighting for livability has been dramatically increased by 100%.
Wow, doubled.
Doubled, yeah. This clear shift in emphasis towards milk components, efficiency of production, and the longevity of cows in the herd is definitely reflected in the trait profiles of these top net merit bulls. It signals a potential shift in breeding goals for many farms, moving beyond just sheer milk volume to really focus on the quality and the value of the milk produced, as well as the overall efficiency and durability of the animals.
Makes sense. Now, for those breeders who have a keen eye for the show ring and maybe prioritize those highly desirable conformation traits, who are the leading type specialists in this latest evaluation?
Right. For our conformation enthusiasts, StoryArc currently leads the pack with a remarkable PTAT of 3.88.
Very high.
Yeah. Following closely behind in terms of type are SHG Lego at 3.83 PTAT and Admire at 3.71 PTAT. These are the bulls that are really excelling in those visual appeal traits that are so important in the show ring.
And what are the specific conformation strengths that these leading type bulls typically bring to the table? Udders, feet and legs.
Generally, they exhibit exceptionally high udder composite scores, with StoryArc leading the way in that category at 2.74 UDC. They also tend to have very strong feet and leg composites, with SHG Lego particularly standing out in that area with a score of 2.22 FLC.
Okay.
These are precisely the kinds of traits that catch the judge's eye and will also contribute to longevity and soundness in the herd.
But there's often a bit of a trade-off, isn't there, between pursuing that extreme type and those high production and economic indexes that we were just discussing? It's a balancing act for many breeders, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. That's very often the case. Bulls that are extreme outliers for type traits sometimes tend to have lower TPI and net merit values compared to the top production-focused leaders. For example, StoryArc, despite his incredible PTAT of 3.88, has a TPI of 2244 and a net merit of -601.
-600. Oof.
Yeah. This really highlights the different breeding priorities and the strategic choices that breeders need to make based on their individual goals,
Definitely. However, you mentioned there are some options available for breeders who are aiming for more of a middle ground, maybe bulls that offer a good combination of both desirable type and solid overall merit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For those breeders seeking a more balanced approach, Star Power RC is an excellent option to consider. He boasts a very respectable PTAT of 3.08 while still maintaining a competitive TPI of 3.137 and a positive net merit of $445.
Okay, that's more like it.
Yeah. And Paulo-YN with a TPI of 3085 and a PTAT of 3.12 is another strong contender in that category, offering a compelling blend of both type and overall genetic merit. These bulls demonstrate that you don't necessarily have to sacrifice one completely for the other.
Good to know. Now, it's not just the traditional black and white Holsteins making significant strides in genetic progress, is it? Let's talk about the exciting advancements we're seeing in the red and white Holstein genetics.
Yeah, the red and white segment of the breed is truly on an impressive upward trajectory. We now have several red and white bulls that are exceeding that significant 3,200 TPI threshold, which is a real milestone. Papaya Red is currently leading the charge with a TPI of 3285, and also boasts very respectable type values at 1.99 PTAT.
Nice.
Morris Red is right up there with a TPI of 3216 and a strong net merit of 1,005 lays. And Pegasus Red comes in at 3162 TPI with an exceptionally high health index of 9.4.
Those are some really impressive numbers, especially that health index on Pegasus Red. What are some of the specific strengths that we're seeing emerge in these leading red and white sires?
Well, Morris Red really stands out with his impressive milk production of 1,499 pounds and that strong net merit figure we mentioned earlier, indicating his potential for significant economic contributions. Pegasus Red's exceptional health traits, as indicated by that high health index, are a huge advantage for herd health and longevity.
Right.
And we shouldn't forget Parby Red, who offers a well-balanced profile with a TPI of 3144 and good type at 1.63 PTAT, demonstrating the increasing depth and quality in the red and white gene pool.
It really sounds like breeders who have a preference for color genetics no longer have to feel like they're compromising on overall genetic merit compared to their black and white counterparts. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely correct. The top-tier red and white bulls are now highly competitive with their black and white counterparts in terms of overall performance and genetic indexes. The performance gap is definitely closing, which is, well, incredibly exciting for breeders who are interested in color or who are looking to diversify their herds.
Definitely exciting times for red and white. Now, every genetic evaluation update seems to bring with it some surprises, bulls that make unexpected leaks up the rankings or experience significant drops. What were some of the notable movements and exciting newcomers in this April 2025 evaluation?
We certainly witnessed some significant shifts in the rankings this time. Abion JZ made a spectacular entrance right near the top of the GTPI list, debuting at impressive GTPIs of 3526 and 3506, respectively.
Big debuts.
Huge. Genosaurus Capilavoid also made a notable climb into the top 10, landing at number 9 with a TPI of 3257. And RMD DARTH SE Game Day TR also surged into the top 10, coming in at 32253 TPI. These kinds of rapid ascensions really highlight the ongoing impact of genomics and identifying and quickly propagating superior genetics.
On the flip side, were there any established players who saw significant drops in their rankings? Always interesting to see who falls.
Yes, there were a few notable declines. Plain Knoll Renegade Trucker TR, somewhat surprisingly, despite actually gaining 75 TPI points in this evaluation, slipped in the rankings from number 3 down to number 8.
Even with a gain.
Yeah, shows how relative it is. But perhaps the most dramatic falls were experienced by Genosaurus McGuire-Et, who plummeted from number 5 all the way down to number 43 with a TPI of 3160.
Ouch.
And delicious H-Noon Tampa-ET TRTE, who dropped from number 9 to number 49 at 3153 TPI. These kinds of significant movements really underscore the dynamic nature of genetic evaluations and, well, the impact that a base change can have on relative rankings within the breed.
Definitely shakes things up. And what about new and noteworthy faces in the red and white category specifically? Any big debuts there?
Yes. We saw some impressive debuts from newcomers in the red and white category, most notably Papaya Red and Parby Red, which again further emphasizes the rapid genetic progress that is happening within colored genetics. Interestingly, the data reveals that we're seeing the highest rate of turnover in the red carrier category, with a significant 20 new bulls entering the top 20.
20 new bulls. Wow.
Yeah, 20. This compares to 14 newcomers in the overall GTPI category, again reflecting both the emergence of new genetic talent and the significant influence of the base change on relative positions across the board.
So with all this focus on achieving these elite levels of genetic merit and seeing some names popping up repeatedly, are there any potential concerns about the overall genetic diversity within the Holstein breed that these evaluations might be highlighting?
that's a really important and forward-thinking question. The April 2025 evaluations do reveal a noticeable concentration of genetic influence within certain prominent sire lines, particularly those with the CAP prefix.
Right, the captain sons.
Exactly, which indicates the significant impact and widespread use of captain sons at the upper echelons of the rankings. Now, while this demonstrates the remarkable speed of genetic progress that can be achieved through genomic selection, it does raise potential concerns regarding inbreeding levels within the breed if these trends aren't managed thoughtfully.
And it's not just the influence of that single sire line, is it? We're seeing names like RIPCORD and DARTH VADR quite a bit too.
Exactly right. The widespread prevalence and high rankings of sires like RIPCORD and DARTH VADR across multiple different trait categories also point to a concentration of genetic influence from a few key individuals. While these bulls undoubtedly possess exceptional genetic merit across a range of important traits, their extensive use in breeding programs could lead to a narrowing of the overall genetic pool within the breed over time if breeders aren't consciously paying attention to maintaining diversity in their mating selections.
Makes sense.
In fact, the data indicates that inbreeding rates within the Holstein breed have increased by a significant 28% since 2015, which is a trend that definitely warrants careful consideration and proactive management strategies for the long-term health and resilience of the breed.
28% increase since 2015. That's quite something. Okay, so with all this in mind, the base change, the rankings, the diversity concerns, what are some really practical and actionable recommendations that you would offer to dairy farmers and breeders as they navigate these new genetic evaluations and start thinking about their future breeding programs?
Okay, the first and most crucial step is to truly understand the implications of this genetic base change. As we've stressed throughout our discussion, when you're comparing these April 2025 evaluation values to those from previous evaluations, it's absolutely essential to remember that the numerical differences you're seeing are largely a result of this statistical reset.
Right.
Therefore, when assessing a bull's genetic merit in the current population, you should really be focusing on those relative rankings within the breed and their percentile ranks, rather than just fixating on the absolute numbers themselves.
That makes perfect sense. So the old benchmarks and absolute PTA targets that we might have used in the past, they might need to be adjusted in this new landscape.
Precisely, yes. If you previously had specific selection thresholds based on absolute values, for instance, only considering bulls with a net merit above, say, a certain dollar figure like $1,000, you will very likely need to recalibrate those thresholds downwards to reflect the new average of the breed.
Okay.
A more effective approach might be to start considering using percentile rankings to maintain a similar level of selection intensity within the population. For example, instead of a fixed enema value, you might aim to select bulls that consistently rank in the top 10 or 15% for net merit within the breed.
Gotcha. And it sounds like this latest evaluation really reinforces the long-standing importance of taking a well-rounded and balanced approach to trait selection in our breeding programs, not just chasing one number.
Absolutely. The continued success of bulls like RIPCORD and DARTH VADR, who exhibit excellence across a range of economically important traits, really highlights the value of aiming for a well-balanced genetic profile in your herd. Rather than chasing extreme values in just one and two specific traits, consider utilizing selection indexes that are specifically designed to align with your individual farm's unique production goals and economic priorities, whether that's emphasizing milk production, components, health traits, or, a combination of all these factors.
You also touched on the growing importance of actively managing genetic diversity within our herds. What are some concrete steps that breeders can take to address this concern in their breeding decisions?
Well, maintaining a healthy level of genetic diversity within your herd requires a conscious and proactive effort. When making breeding decisions, consider intentionally incorporating bulls from diverse and less common genetic backgrounds into your mating plans, where it's appropriate and aligns with your overall goals.
Right.
Make sure to utilize the inbreeding management tools that are often readily available through your genetic suppliers and breed associations. And don't overlook the potential value of using red carrier bulls as a strategic tool for introducing new genetic diversity and, the red coat color trait into your herd, as they can offer valuable outcross pedigrees in some situations.
Interesting point about the red carriers. And looking beyond just the raw numbers and indexes, what other crucial factors should breeders be taking into consideration when making their sire selections?
Yeah, that's important. While these comprehensive genetic evaluations provide an incredibly valuable wealth of data and insights, it's absolutely crucial for breeders to look beyond the numbers alone. When possible, Consider the real-world performance data from a bull's actual milking daughters, paying close attention to the reliability figures associated with those evaluations. And always keep the critical factor of genetic diversity in mind as you make your selections. Don't hesitate to consult with experienced genetic advisors who can provide personalized insights and guidance tailored to your specific breeding objectives and the unique needs of your herd.
Sound advice. Now, one area that I know has been on the minds of many of our listeners is the data related to calving traits. What's the latest update on that front in this April evaluation? Anything new there?
That's an important and timely question. The updated data for calving-related traits, such as calving ease and stillbirth rates, is actually on a slightly different release schedule and was not included in this particular April evaluation update.
Okay.
We are currently anticipating that this updated information for calving traits will be released with the subsequent August genetic evaluations. In the meantime, it would probably be prudent for breeders to exercise a degree of caution when making significant breeding decisions based solely on the existing calving data, as those values will also undergo recalculation as part of the ongoing base change adjustments and are expected to be updated in the fall.
Good to know. So, patience is needed on the calving traits front. All right, so the key takeaway for our listeners today seems to be that while these April 2025 Holstein genetic evaluations present us with a new set of numbers across the board, the fundamental principles of driving genetic progress within our herds remain largely the same. This base change essentially provides us with a more current and hopefully accurate snapshot of the genetic landscape within the Holstein population.
Exactly. That sums it up well. We are still observing the continued dominance of those elite sires at the top of the rankings, and it's genuinely exciting to witness the ongoing and rapid advancements in genetic merit in both the conventional black and white Holsteins and the steadily improving and increasingly competitive colored breeds.
Definitely. So I guess the provocative thought to leave everyone with is, as you navigate these newly recalibrated numbers and consider your breeding strategies moving forward, how will you strike that critical balance between chasing those elite genetics that offer rapid potential for progress and diligently ensuring the long-term genetic diversity and resilience of your herd? It's certainly a question worth careful consideration as you make your breeding plans in this evolving genetic landscape.
Absolutely. A crucial question.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this insightful deep dive into the April evaluations.
My pleasure.
Until our next discussion.
Heading north to Canada, we see similar ripples from the genetic base change, but with some unique twists. OCD Monkey leads the genomic bulls list with an impressive GLPI of 4,079, showcasing balanced production and conformation traits. On the daughter-proven side, SSI PR Renegade retains his dominance with an LPI of 3,850. What sets Canada apart is its focus on balanced breeding, production efficiency paired with improved health traits like fertility and longevity. Polled genetics are also gaining ground, with bulls like FRAHOLME VEC TRITON-PP making notable debuts.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Bullvine Newsroom. We're diving headfirst into the April 2025 Canadian genetic evaluations. You know those new numbers hit and everyone scrambles to see what's what?
Yeah, they're out there. And trust me, we've been poring over them. So you don't have to wade through all those spreadsheets.
That's right. We're doing the heavy lifting here, folks. Distilling it down to the good stuff, the stuff that really matters for your breeding decisions.
Absolutely. We've been analyzing both the genomic young guns and the daughter-proven veterans. You know those Holsteins with daughters out there proving their worth?
Exactly. Giving you the inside scoop on the latest trends and movers and shakers in the genetic world.
Yeah, our goal here is to equip you with the knowledge you need. To make informed choices that are going to benefit your herd for the long haul.
It's not just about the numbers, though, right? We're going to break it down into practical advice, things you can actually use on your farm, from boosting that milk production to having cows that just keep on giving.
Yeah, we're talking about longevity, healthy udders, strong feet and legs, all those factors that contribute to a thriving and profitable dairy operation.
So settle in, grab your coffee or your favorite beverage, whatever, helps you unwind after a long day in the barn, and let's get this genetic deep dive started.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's jump right into the genomic bulls, those up-and-comers, with all that genetic potential. And guess what? Sitting at the top of the genomic mountain is OCD MONKEY-ET, with a whopping GLPI of 4079.
That's a name you're going to hear a lot, I think. He's not just a flash in the pan either. Those numbers are backed by some seriously impressive stats.
Like what? Spill the beans. What makes this guy a genetic superstar?
Okay, so we're talking plus 1,267 kilograms of milk, can you believe that? Plus 134 kilograms of fat and a solid 74 kilograms of protein. That milk figure alone, it's a significant jump from what we've seen in previous top bulls.
Wow, that's a whole lot of milk. It's like having an extra cow in the barn without the extra mouth to feed.
Pretty much. But it's not just about quantity, right? We need quality too. And OCD MONKEY-ET delivers on that front as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he's got the looks to match those impressive numbers. A plus 11 mammary system and plus 12 dairy strength, those aren't just for show.
Not at all. A strong mammary system is essential for longevity. You know, fewer udder issues, higher milk quality, and good dairy strength usually means a healthy, resilient cow. Fewer vet bills, more productive lactations. It's a win-win.
So basically this bull is the whole package. Strong production, good conformation, healthy and long-lasting. What more could you ask for?
Well, there are other strong contenders, too. I mean, right behind OCD MONKEY-ET, just a hair's breadth away, is Progenesis Impulse with a GLPI of 4078.
Ah, yes. Another name that's been creating a buzz. What's this guy's specialty?
Well, he's a bit of a fat specialist. He's got an impressive plus 132 kilograms of fat. So if you're on a component-based pricing system, that extra butter fat can really add up. More money in your pocket.
Touching more butterfat, more dollars, music to any dairy farmer's ears. And I hear he's also got something else going for him. Something that can save a lot of headaches down the line.
You're talking about daughter fertility, right? Yep. Progenesis Impulse is known for siring daughters with good fertility. Reliable breeders, shorter calving intervals, less time and money spent on getting those cows pregnant. It's all part of that balanced approach we're seeing in these top genomic bulls.
Speaking of balance, let's take a quick look at the rest of the genomic top 5. We've got Attaway Beyond Fitness-Et at 4062, OCD Milana at 4059, and Progenesis Melnick rounding out the group at 4038. It's like a who's who of balanced genetics.
It's not about chasing one single trait anymore, right? The best bulls excel across the board. They offer that solid combination of high production, good conformation, and those essential fitness traits. So the whole picture.
Yeah, you need a cow that can not only produce milk, but also stay healthy and in the herd for a long time. It's about sustainability and efficiency, and it seems like the Canadian breeding program is really hitting the mark on that front.
Definitely. And let's not forget about another trend that's gaining momentum, the rise of polled genetics.
Oh yeah, that's a game changer. No more horns, less stress for the cows, less work for the farmers. It's a win-win for everyone involved. And speaking of polled genetics, we've got a newcomer making a splash in the top 30. FRAHOLME VEC Triton-PP coming in at number 30 with a GLPI of 3952.
That's right, and he's homozygous polled, meaning all of his offspring will inherit that polled gene. No horns guaranteed.
Talk about peace of mind. But he's not just a pretty face, is he?
Nope, he's got the numbers to back it up. Plus 940 kilogram milk, plus 105 kilograms fat, plus 63 kilogram protein. And here's what's really interesting. He's got a plus 0.58% deviation for fat and plus 0.25% for protein, meaning his daughters are producing milk that's richer in those valuable components.
So more milk and higher component percentages. That's a double whammy of profitability.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that polled genetics are really coming into their own. You don't have to sacrifice production or any other trait for that matter.
All right. Let's move on from the young guns and talk about the seasoned veterans, the daughter-proven bulls. These guys have daughters out there in the real world proving their worth day in and day out. And guess who's still holding on to that number 1 spot?
I think we all know who you're talking about.
SSI PR RENEGADE-ET, still the reigning champion with an LPI of 3,850. He's like the Tom Brady of dairy bulls. Just keeps on performing year after year.
Well, he's definitely got the stats to back it up. Plus 1,154 kilograms of milk, plus 98 kilograms of fat, plus 67 kilograms of protein. And these are consistent results we're seeing across a huge number of his daughters.
We're talking 1,509 daughters and 457 herds. That's a pretty solid sample size.
Absolutely. And with that many daughters, we have a high level of reliability in his proof. So you can be confident that what you see is what you get.
And what we see is a bull that sires daughters with outstanding production, good health, and fantastic feet and legs. Plus 14 for feet and legs. That's a big deal when it comes to longevity.
No doubt about it. Good feet and legs mean fewer lameness issues. Cows that can walk comfortably to the feed bunk and the milking parlor. They stay in the herd longer and produce more milk over their lifetime.
So it's not just about production per lactation, it's about total lifetime production. And Renegade-ET is definitely a champion in that regard.
Right on his tail, though, is another Renegade son. Seamer's Renegade Rosline in second place with an LPI of 300 and 835. The Renegade legacy lives on.
What makes this particular Renegade's son stand out?
Well, he's a real fat powerhouse. Plus 144 kilograms of fat and an incredible plus 1.24% fat deviation. That's a huge jump in butterfat content. And for those of you on component-based pricing, that translates into some serious extra cash.
More buddy fat, more money. It's a simple equation.
And then rounding out our top 3 daughter-proven sires, we have Genosource John Boy Eat with an LPI of 327. He's a bit more balanced than the previous 2.
What do you mean by balanced?
Well, he's got very respectable production numbers, but he also excels in those fitness traits, fertility, health, all those things that contribute to a long and productive life. If you're looking for a well-rounded bull, he's a great option.
So he's like the all-around athlete of dairy bulls. Good at everything.
Exactly. And then we've got a bit of a genetic anomaly in the top 10. 3 bulls from Genosource. Captain It, Jackie Yen, and John Eaton, all tied at 3816 LPI with almost identical proofs.
Wait a minute. How is that even possible? 3 bulls with the exact same genetic makeup.
Well, they're full brothers. And they've performed almost identically in their daughter proofs so far. It's a testament to the power of genetics and the consistency that can be achieved through selective breeding.
So it's like having triplets, but in bull form.
Pretty much. And for you as a producer, it means you have multiple options for accessing the same great genetics.
All right, let's shift gears now and talk about those bulls that are all about aesthetics. The ones that make you say, wow, that's a good-looking cow. The conformation specialists.
The beauty pageant winners of the bovine world.
Exactly. And leading the pack in the genomic category is Walnut Lawn PG Bright Star with a conformation score of plus 20. That's like winning Miss Universe in the cow world. And he's not just a pretty face either.
Nope, he's got the brains to match the beauty. Plus 1,285 kilograms milk. So you're not sacrificing production for conformation.
That's the best of both worlds right there. And right behind him, we have Walnut Lawn PG Love Story and Progenesis Artorias, both with plus 18 for confirmation. It seems like Walnut Lawn and Progenesis are really cornering the market on good-looking bulls.
You're definitely breeding for type.
Yeah.
And it's paying off.
Now, in the daughter-proven category, the top confirmation sire is Blonde in Energy with a score of plus 17. And he's not just good-looking overall. He excels in some key areas.
Right. Plus 13 for mammary system and plus 13 for feet and legs. Those are crucial traits for longevity and functionality.
Yeah.
A well-attached, high-quality, udder and strong, sound feet and legs are essential for a long and productive life.
Absolutely. You can have all the milk in the world, but if the cow can't walk to the feed bunk or has udder problems, it's all for nothing.
Exactly. And then we have Black Silver Crushable Stan with plus 16 for confirmation. Another reliable choice for those who prioritize type.
And rounding out our top 3 is Vowo E223 with plus 15. Another polled bull making his mark on the confirmation front.
It just goes to show that polled genetics are no longer a niche market. They're right up there with the best of the best.
So it's clear that the Canadian dairy industry is making great strides in breeding better cows. Cows that are more productive, healthier, longer lasting, and increasingly hornless.
It's a really exciting time to be in the dairy business.
It really is. And with all these new genetic tools and technologies at our disposal, the future looks bright.
Brighter than ever.
So what are some of the key takeaways from these April 2025 evaluations? What do our listeners need to know to make the best breeding decisions for their herds?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to emphasize the importance of balanced breeding. We're seeing a clear trend towards bulls that excel across the board. High production, good conformation, strong fitness traits. It's not about chasing one extreme trait anymore. It's about the whole package.
Right. You need a cow that can do it all. Produce milk, stay healthy, and last a long time.
Exactly. And secondly, the rise of polled genetics is something to pay close attention to. We're seeing more and more polled bulls ranking among the top sires, and that's only going to continue. So if you're not already incorporating polled genetics into your breeding program, now is the time to start thinking about it.
No more horns, less stress for the cows, less work for the farmers. It's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And thirdly, we're seeing continued improvement in health traits. Daughter fertility, somatic cell scores, all those indicators are trending in the right direction, which means healthier cows, fewer vet bills, and more milk in the tank.
Healthy cows are happy cows, and happy cows produce more milk. It's a simple equation.
And finally, we're seeing a strong focus on production efficiency, especially those high component yields. With component-based pricing becoming more and more common, it's essential to breed cows that produce milk that's rich in fat and protein.
So it's not just about quantity anymore, it's about quality too.
Exactly. It's about producing the kind of milk that consumers want and that processors are willing to pay a premium for.
So to sum it all up, the Canadian dairy industry is on the right track. We're breeding better cows every year, cows that are more productive, healthier, and more efficient.
And it's all thanks to the hard work and dedication of breeders, geneticists, and farmers across the country.
So keep up the great work, everyone. And keep an eye out for those top sires in the April 2025 evaluations. They're the key to unlocking the genetic potential of your herd.
Now, as you process all this information and look at your own herd and your own goals, what breeding decisions will you make to ensure the future success of your dairy operation?
It's definitely something to think about. The future of dairy is in our hands, and these genetic evaluations are a powerful tool to help us shape that future. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, folks, and we'll see you next time with more insights and analysis from the Bovine Newsroom.
Take care, everyone.
Now let's talk fertility, a trait that's been under intense scrutiny worldwide. Countries like the US, Germany, and Canada are taking wildly different approaches to achieve gains in Holstein breeding. In the US, daughter pregnancy rate, DPR, has been dethroned as the dominant fertility metric. The new fertility index gives equal weight to cow conception rate, CCR, prioritizing cows that conceive quickly post-calving over long-term predictions. Germany focuses heavily on conception rates within its RZR index, but is shifting toward holistic health metrics as a foundation for reproductive success. Meanwhile, Canada takes a multi-trait approach that includes calving ease and gestation length, proving that fertility isn't just about conception, it's about durability.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's kind of mind-blowing. 20 years ago, if you were talking about Holstein fertility, it was a bit like discussing dial-up internet, not exactly cutting edge.
Hey, right. Ancient history.
But fast forward to today, and suddenly fertility is surging. What's fascinating is that the US, Germany, and Canada are all using totally different playbooks powered by the almost magical advancements in genomics to build more fertile cows. And you, listening to us right now, making those crucial breeding decisions on your farm, you are smack dab in the middle of this global race for reproductive efficiency.
Exactly. As someone, deeply involved in the dairy industry, you're constantly juggling feed prices, milk markets, a million other things to keep your operation humming and profitable. And let's be brutally honest, if your cows aren't getting pregnant and staying pregnant, a lot of those other efforts, well, they feel like trying to fill a leaky bucket.
Yeah, frustrating.
Today, we're taking a real deep dive into how three of the big hitters in Holstein genetics, the US, Germany, and Canada, are tackling this really critical area of fertility. We've sifted through the latest data and research so you don't have to spend your precious time wading through scientific papers.
We did the homework for you.
Think of this as getting the inside track on the strategies that are actually moving the needle, the real game changers in fertility.
So our mission for this deep dive is super clear. We want to dissect the specific fertility traits that are getting the most attention in the US, Germany, and Canada. We're going to pull apart their distinct approaches, really understand the why behind those approaches, and ultimately figure out what this all could mean for your breeding program and the future of your herd, right there in your barns.
And to do that, we're drawing on some seriously insightful information, looking at how these leading countries are not just measuring, but actively selecting for fertility. So grab a coffee, maybe a notepad, because we're about to take a fascinating look at the numbers, the underlying philosophies about what makes a fertile cow, and the very real impact these high-level decisions are having on the ground on dairy farms, just like yours.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of each country's strategy, let's just rewind the clock a bit. It wasn't always smooth sailing when it came to getting Holsteins to breed back efficiently, was it?
No, definitely not.
I mean, there was a period where milk production seemed to take center stage, almost at the expense of everything else.
Absolutely. If you look back from, say, the 1960s all the way up to the early 2000s, the focus in Holstein breeding was heavily geared towards maximizing milk yield.
Yeah, big time.
And boy, did we see incredible gains in production. But, and this is a big but, with flashing neon lights, this came at a significant cost to the cow's ability to get and stay pregnant.
Right.
Fertility in the Holstein breed took a nosedive. It became It really became a major concern for the entire dairy industry.
Alarmingly so. It was like we were building these incredible milk-producing machines that just weren't quite as good at the whole reproduction thing.
Exactly.
But the good news is that about 2 decades ago, there was a real industry-wide push to start actively selecting for fertility traits again.
Yep, a turning point.
And as we mentioned right off the top, the arrival of genomics has been an absolute game changer, really helping to reverse that concerning downward trend. It's like we finally found the right tools in the genetic toolbox to tackle this issue head on.
Precisely. And what's particularly interesting is that the US, Germany, and Canada all recognize this problem. They all saw the declining fertility, and they all decided to address it proactively. However, each country developed its own very distinct approach, reflecting their unique priorities and philosophies. It's a great illustration that there isn't just one single right way to breed a fertile cow.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Different roads can, and hopefully will, lead to the same destination. More fertile, more efficient, and ultimately more profitable cows for you.
Okay, let's start by looking at what's happening in the United States. They've got their own way of evaluating fertility, and it revolves around a few key traits that they keep a close eye on.
That's right. In the U.S., the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, or CDCB, you'll hear that acronym a lot.
Yep, CDCB.
Provides the official genetic evaluations, and they focus on 4 key fertility traits. First, there's daughter pregnancy rate, or DPR. This is a metric many of you are likely familiar with.
Yeah, DPR has been around.
It essentially tells you the probability of a non-pregnant cow becoming pregnant during each 21-day heat cycle. Then you have cow conception rate, or CCR, which looks specifically at a lactating cow's ability to conceive each time she's bred.
Oh, okay.
There's also heifer conception rate, HCR, which, as the name suggests, focuses on conception in those all-important maiden heifers.
Crucial.
And finally, early first calving, or EFC, which indicates the age at which heifers have their first calf.
Right. So those are the individual pieces of the puzzle. And to get an overall picture of a bull's or a cow's genetic merit for fertility, the U.S. Holstein Association combines these into their fertility index, or FI. And this is where things get really interesting, because there's been a pretty significant shakeup in how they actually calculate that index, hasn't there?
Okay.
It's not the same formula it used to be.
A dramatic shift, you could definitely say.
Yeah.
Up until very recently, the fertility index was heavily weighted towards DPR.
Right, like 70%, wasn't it?
Exactly. The old formula looked like this. FI equals 0.7 DPR plus 0.1 PCR plus 0.1 DCCR plus 0.1 EFC ECA. So as you can see, DPR was the undisputed king, making up a whopping 70% of the index.
Yeah.
However, as of August 2024, the formula has been revised to FI 0.4 times DPR plus 0.4 HCCR plus 0.1 HCR plus 0.1 HAC. Notice anything significant.
Whoa, yeah. 40-40 split now between DPR and CCR.
Exactly. DPR's weight has been practically cut in half, and cow conception rate, CCR, now carries exactly the same weight. It's a massive change after 2 decades of DPR being the dominant factor in U.S. fertility evaluations.
Wow, that's a huge demotion for DPR. It was the top dog for so long.
Yeah.
So what gives? Why the sudden change of heart? What prompted the U.S. to completely rethink how they're evaluating fertility after all this time?
Well, the industry uncovered a pretty critical limitation, a real flaw, with relying so heavily on DPR as the primary indicator of fertility.
Okay.
It turns out that DPR doesn't really take into account something called the voluntary waiting period, or VWP.
Ah, the VWP. Right.
This is the period after a cow calves that dairy farmers intentionally wait before breeding her again. And this VWP can vary quite significantly from farm to farm, depending on management goals and herd health protocols.
Makes sense.
The problem is that cows in herds with longer VWPs would naturally appear less fertile based on the DPR calculation, even if they conceived quickly and efficiently once they were actually bred.
Ah, I see. So a cow in a herd where they wait, say, 100 days before breeding might look less fertile on paper based on DPR.
Exactly.
Not because she has trouble getting pregnant when bred, but simply because she had fewer opportunities to get pregnant within the standard measurement window after calving. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So the longer wait period artificially deflated their DPR, introducing a bias into the genetic evaluations.
So by bumping up CCR to equal status with DPR, they're trying to get a more accurate picture of a cow's fundamental ability to conceive when she is actually bred, regardless of when that breeding occurs relative to her last calving.
Precisely. And there's also a significant economic angle to this shift. As a spokesperson for the CDCB put it, this new 40-40 weighting of DPR and CCR isn't just a mathematical tweak, it's a survival strategy for today's dairy environment.
A survival strategy, oh.
Yeah. In this era of high input costs and tight margins, farms can't really afford to have cows that take a long time to conceive, even if they eventually do. They need cows that can get pregnant relatively quickly when they're ready to be bred.
Makes sense economically.
It's about maximizing reproductive efficiency and getting those pregnancies established in a timely and cost-effective manner. The bottom line is, a pregnancy sooner rather than later often translates directly to better profitability.
So the key takeaway for our listeners in the U.S., and really anyone using U.S. genetics, is that the long reign of DPR as the sole king of fertility, well, it's over.
Pretty much, yeah.
The new fertility index is signaling a shift towards really prioritizing those cows that can get pregnant now, not just those who might have a higher probability of getting pregnant over a longer period, which could be skewed by management practices like VWP.
Precisely. It's a much more immediate and direct focus on the conception efficiency of lactating cows at the time of breeding.
All right, let's hop across the Atlantic now and take a look at how Germany approaches this whole fertility puzzle. Their system sounds quite different, a real contrast to what we see in the U.S., if I remember correctly.
It is indeed a different ballgame in Germany. They take a dramatically different tack with their RZR, which stands for Reproduction Index.
RZR, okay.
Now, unlike the U.S., with its 4 publicly available traits contributing to the FI, Germany's RZR actually incorporates 5 different traits. But here's the real eye-opener. They place a massive 90% of the total index weight on traits directly related to conception.
90%? Wow.
That's a stark, almost unbelievable contrast to the U.S.'s newly balanced approach. It really highlights their core philosophy when it comes to breeding for fertility.
90% on conception. That's not just a focus. That's almost an obsession. So what are the 5 specific traits that make up their RZR index and command such a significant weighting?
Okay, they evaluate, first, the interval from calving to first insemination, which gets a 10% slice of the RZR pie.
Right, 10%.
Then they look at non-return rate in heifers and non-return rate in cows, each contributing 7.5% and a substantial 37.5% respectively.
Big chunk for the cows there.
Huge chunk. Finally, they consider the number of services from first to successful insemination in both heifers, 7.5%, and cows, again, 37.5%.
Right.
So, as you can clearly see, the overwhelming majority of the emphasis is placed squarely on those non-return rates, which essentially indicate if a pregnancy was established, and the overall efficiency of getting both cows and heifers pregnant as quickly as possible.
That really hammers home their priority, doesn't it? It's all about getting those animals in calf quickly and efficiently, minimizing those open days.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned something earlier about the RZR's importance within their overall breeding goals, maybe shifting a little bit. It's not the be-all and end-all anymore.
You're absolutely right to pick up on that. What's quite telling is that Germany has been strategically decreasing the relative importance of the RZR within their overall total merit index, which is called the RZG.
RZG, right.
Now, this isn't to suggest that they suddenly don't care about fertility, far from it, given that 90% weighting on conception within the RZR itself.
Yeah, 90% is hard to ignore.
But it does reflect a growing and significant emphasis on other crucial factors, particularly health traits. They've developed and are increasingly prioritizing an RZ Health Index, which now includes evaluations for various reproductive health disorders alongside other health-related issues.
So they're taking a broader view, looking at the bigger picture of the cow's overall well-being and how that foundational health ultimately impacts her ability to reproduce consistently and efficiently over multiple lactations.
Exactly. Their breeding philosophy seems to be evolving towards the understanding that you can't simply breed for conception in isolation.
Right.
A cow that is genetically predisposed to be healthy, that recovers well after calving, and that has a robust immune system is inherently going to be more likely to exhibit good fertility and remain a productive member of the herd for longer.
Makes total sense.
As the German Holstein Association has emphasized, and I think this really encapsulates their thinking, we don't just breed for conception, we breed cows that recover. A healthy uterus today often means 3 or more additional lactations tomorrow.
That's a great quote.
So in their overall breeding strategy, health is becoming increasingly recognized as the bedrock upon which good reproductive performance is built.
So the key takeaway from Germany's approach seems to be a very strong initial and ongoing focus on the immediate ability to conceive efficiently, minimizing services and open days. But with a growing and crucial recognition that the cow's overall health, including specific reproductive health, plays a vital role in long-term reproductive success, cow longevity, and sustained profitability.
Precisely. They're not just chasing pregnancies. They're trying to build a population of cows that are inherently reproductively sound, healthy, and therefore more durable and profitable in the long run.
Okay, we've covered the U.S. with their newly balanced act and Germany with their conception obsession and growing focus on health. Now, let's head north to Canada. Their approach has often been described as the most comprehensive and multifaceted of the three. What makes their system stand out in the global landscape of Holstein fertility evaluations?
Canada definitely takes a very holistic view, as you said. They employ what they consider a sophisticated multi-trait reproductive performance model that actually integrates both calving ease and direct fertility measures into its evaluation.
Interesting. Calving ease, too.
Yeah. When you look specifically at their daughter fertility index, it's not just relying on one or two key traits. It's actually comprised of 6 different fertility traits, reflecting more granular and comprehensive assessment.
6 traits. That sounds like they're really digging down into the details and trying to capture a much more complete picture of a cow's reproductive capabilities. What are those 6 components that make up the Canadian Daughter Fertility Index?
Okay, they include age at first service, which carries an 11% weighting, non-return rate in heifers at 16%, first service to conception in heifers at 8%, calving to first service at 15%, non-return rate in cows, which receives a significant 34% weighting.
Wow, 34% for cow non-return. That's big.
That's the largest single piece. And finally, first service to conception in cows at 16%. So as you can observe, their approach considers both how quickly animals are bred and their ability to successfully establish and maintain a pregnancy in both heifers and mature cows.
And you also mentioned that these 6 fertility traits are just a part of an even larger, more encompassing model that they use. It's not just about these 6 in isolation.
That's absolutely correct. Those 6 fertility traits are just one piece of a larger model that evaluates a total of 16 different traits.
16.
Okay, this is a key differentiator for Canada. They place a strong emphasis on the complex interplay and interrelationships between various traits. For instance, they fully recognize that how easily a cow calves her calving ease can have a significant and cascading impact on her subsequent fertility and overall health.
Right, makes sense. A tough calving messes things up.
Exactly. So they're not looking at fertility in a vacuum. They're considering the whole biological system of the cow.
Interesting. And you also teased that Canada has a sort of secret weapon in their approach, something that's not even a direct fertility trait but has a big influence. That sounds intriguing. Spill the beans.
Hey, it is quite interesting. Canada's secret weapon, as some has playfully called it, is gestation length.
Gestation length. Okay, how does that fit in?
Now, it's crucial to understand that gestation length isn't actually included directly within their daughter fertility index calculation. However, it plays a profoundly important indirect role because it has a very significant impact on calving ease, which, as we just discussed, directly and substantially affects subsequent fertility.
Right.
Think about it. Longer gestation periods tend to result in larger calves at birth.
Bigger calves.
Larger calves can lead to more difficult calvings, an increased risk of stillbirths, a higher incidence of retained placentas, and ultimately longer and more challenging recovery periods for the cow post-calving.
Yeah, a whole cascade of problems.
All of which can negatively impact her ability to cycle normally and conceive in a timely manner for the next lactation.
So by strategically selecting for sires that tend to produce calves with slightly shorter gestation lengths, even though it's not a direct fertility trait in their index,
Exactly.
they're essentially setting the stage for better calving ease across the board, which in turn leads to fewer post-calving complications and a quicker and more efficient return to normal reproductive cycling. It's like they're tackling the root causes that can hinder fertility down the line.
Exactly. As one geneticist at the Canadian Dairy Network aptly put it, gestation length is almost a silent fertility trait.
A silent fertility trait. I like that.
Optimize it through careful selection, and you can solve a multitude of downstream issues related to calving ease, stillbirths, and the cow's smooth and rapid recovery postpartum, all of which have a significant positive effect on her subsequent fertility.
That's smart.
So while the US and Germany might be more hyper-focused on the direct metrics of conception, Canada is playing a more nuanced game by looking at these related traits that have a powerful ripple effect on overall reproductive performance and long-term herd health and efficiency.
So the big takeaway from Canada's approach is this really comprehensive multi-trait perspective. They're not just looking at the simple binary of whether a cow gets pregnant or not.
Right.
They're taking into account a wider array of interconnected factors, such as calving ease, which is heavily influenced by gestation length, as critical components of overall reproductive success, cow well-being, and long-term efficiency on the dairy farm.
Absolutely. They're embracing a much more holistic, systems-based view of fertility, recognizing that it's not just one single factor at play, but a complex interplay of genetics and physiology.
It's truly fascinating to see these three major players in the global Holstein industry taking such distinct and, in some cases, almost opposite routes when it comes to breeding for fertility.
It really is.
But the really interesting and perhaps somewhat surprising thing is that despite their very different strategies, they are all actually reporting positive results and making genetic progress in improving Holstein fertility within their respective populations.
That's a really crucial and encouraging point for everyone listening. Despite the contrasting approaches and the different traits they prioritize, all three nations are demonstrating tangible genetic improvements in key fertility traits.
That's great news.
The U.S., as we discussed, has managed to reverse those previous concerning declines in fertility, observing better overall pregnancy rates and fewer services required per conception.
Okay.
Germany is seeing improved daughter fertility metrics in their top-ranking sires, indicating their intense focus on conception is paying dividends.
Good for them.
And Canada's data suggest they've been successful in largely avoiding the steep fertility declines that have been observed in some other dairy regions around the world, likely thanks to their more holistic approach.
Yeah, that holistic view seems to be working.
So clearly, when it comes to breeding more fertile cows, there's more than one way to effectively get the job done. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
To really highlight these key differences and some of the underlying similarities, we've put together a quick snapshot comparing the main metrics each country emphasizes in their fertility evaluations. We've got a table for that.
Right. So in the U.S., the key metric now within their fertility index is cow conception rate, carrying that significant 40% weight.
CCR, 40%.
Yeah. Their primary economic focus really centers on the return on investment generated by those lactating cows.
Makes sense.
Germany, with their RZR index, is overwhelmingly focused on the overall conception rate, which, as we said, makes up a staggering 90% of their index.
90% still blows my mind.
And their economic driver appears to be herd turnover speed, getting cows pregnant quickly to maintain production flow.
Right. Keep them moving.
And then Canada, with their comprehensive daughter fertility index, places the highest individual weight on cow non-return rate at 34%.
The biggest chunk for Canada.
Reflecting a broader economic focus on achieving robust lifetime pregnancy success for their cows.
It seems that while the specific metrics they track and the weights they assign to them can differ quite a bit, there are some fundamental underlying shared drivers that are contributing to this overall global success we're seeing in improving fertility in Holsteins. It's not just about the numbers. There are some common principles at play.
Definitely. One key factor that stands out is strategic integration. All three countries have made a conscious and deliberate effort to fully integrate fertility into their overarching comprehensive breeding programs, alongside the more traditional emphasis on production traits like milk yield and component percentages.
It's not an afterthought anymore.
Exactly. It's no longer just solely about how much milk a cow gives in a lactation. Her ability to reproduce efficiently and consistently over multiple lactations is now widely recognized as being equally, if not more, important for long-term profitability and sustainability of a dairy operation.
And the significant advancements in selection tools and the sophistication of their genetic evaluations have undoubtedly played a major role in this progress.
Oh, absolutely.
These multi-trait selection indices like Net Merit in the US, RZG in Germany, and LPI in Canada allow breeders to make much more informed and balanced selection decisions when choosing sires and managing their breeding programs.
Absolutely. These comprehensive genetic indices provide breeders with the ability to look at a much wider array of economically important traits simultaneously.
Yeah, see the whole picture.
This allows them to select animals that not only excel in one or two specific areas, but have a more well-rounded and favorable overall genetic profile, which now strongly includes improved fertility alongside production, health, and longevity. It's about breeding a more complete and profitable dairy cow.
But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't address what's arguably been the biggest game changer in this whole area, the genomic revolution.
Genomics, yes.
How has the advent of genomics and genomic testing truly impacted the ability to make faster and more accurate genetic progress in complex traits like fertility?
Genomics has been an absolute paradigm shift, a true game changer in every sense of the word. Being able to obtain a much more accurate and reliable assessment of an animal's inherent genetic potential for fertility at a much younger age, even as a calf.
Right, super early.
Has dramatically accelerated the rate of genetic progress. Think about it. In the past, we had to wait for daughters to enter production and have their own reproductive records to even begin to evaluate a sire's impact on fertility. Genomics has essentially bypassed that lengthy waiting period. As one researcher at the USDA's Animal Genomics and Improvement Laboratory put it quite succinctly, genomics cut approximately 5 years off the timeline for achieving significant fertility gains.
5 years, wow.
What took decades to accomplish through traditional progeny testing using daughter pregnancy rate, we've now been able to achieve in roughly half a generation, thanks to the focus on CCR and other fertility-related traits in genomic evaluations.
It's really compressed the time frame for making meaningful and impactful genetic improvements in fertility.
That's an incredible acceleration. 5 years shaved off the timeline for genetic gain that really underscores the immense power and potential of these advanced genomic tools in modern dairy breeding.
Now, we've talked about the different approaches each country is taking and the successes they're seeing, but it's also important to remember that the heritability of direct fertility traits is generally considered to be quite low compared to something like milk production.
Right, that's a key challenge.
How do these countries manage to make significant progress in improving fertility despite this inherent genetic challenge?
That's an excellent question, and it really highlights the sophistication and effectiveness of their comprehensive breeding strategies. While the direct heritability of traits like DPR or conception rate on their own might be relatively low.
It's really low sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes only a few percent.
Oh.
But by effectively leveraging genomic information, which significantly increases the accuracy and reliability of those genetic predictions, and by carefully constructing multi-trait selection indices that thoughtfully incorporate related and often more heritable indicator traits, they're able to indirectly but very effectively select for improved overall fertility.
So, using related traits.
Exactly. You can see this trend in the data. For example, while daughter pregnancy rate in the U.S. might have a heritability of only around 4%, its genomic reliability is considerably higher, around 58%.
Okay. Much more reliable with genomics.
Similarly, cow non-return rate in Canada has a heritability of about 8%, but boasts a genomic reliability of approximately 67%. Germany's KON, which is a measure closely related to conception rate, has a heritability of around 6%, but a genomic reliability of about 63%. And notably, gestation length, which Canada strategically focuses on, has a much higher heritability at 22%, with a genomic reliability of 71%. Which really underscores the effectiveness of their indirect selection approach.
It really underscores the key point that you don't necessarily have to directly select for a trait with inherently low heritability if you can identify and select for related, more heritable traits that have a strong positive influence on the trait you're ultimately trying to improve.
That's right.
Canada's strategic focus on gestation length as a lever to improve calving ease and subsequent fertility seems like a prime example of that smart and innovative thinking in action.
Exactly. And it also brings up the crucial point that while genetics plays an increasingly important role, good on-farm management still remains a very significant factor, especially when it comes to expressing those genetic potentials.
Yeah, genetics isn't everything.
For instance, something like daughter pregnancy rate can still be significantly influenced by farm-specific management practices, such as the voluntary waiting period and heat detection efficiency. Management matters a lot.
So with these diverse approaches being implemented across the globe, is there any emerging indication of which particular strategy might ultimately prove to be the most economically beneficial for dairy producers on the ground, for the folks listening to us right now?
That's truly the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, literally.
And the honest answer is that the optimal strategy is likely going to depend on the specific goals, resources, and management style of an individual dairy farm.
Right, it's farm specific.
However, we do have some interesting data points that offer some clues. For instance, Canada's strong emphasis on pregnancy durability, which is reflected in that higher weighting on cow non-return rate in their daughter fertility index.
That 34%, yeah.
Really highlights the fact that achieving a pregnancy quickly isn't the only pathway to enhance profitability. Ensuring that a cow stays pregnant through to a successful calving is often just as, if not more, critical for maximizing lifetime productivity and reducing costs associated with repeat breedings.
Avoiding those pregnancy losses.
Exactly. The fact that top 10% daughter fertility bulls in Canada have been shown to lead to a significant 12% improvement in cow non-return rates really speaks volumes about the tangible economic impact of reducing those costly repeat breedings and increasing the likelihood of a successful full-term pregnancy.
Absolutely. Fewer repeat breedings translate directly to lower semen costs, reduced labor expenses associated with insemination and pregnancy checks, and a more consistent and predictable calving interval across the herd, all of which contribute directly to a healthier bottom line for the dairy operation.
And looking at the other side of the coin, we have that compelling report from a dairy producer in Wisconsin who made a strategic decision to switch to using bulls with higher cow conception rate, CCR proofs, aligning their breeding program with the U.S.'s new emphasis on this trait.
Following the new U.S. index focus.
Right. They reported achieving a significant 18% reduction in their overall conception costs.
18%, that's substantial.
That real-world example really drives home the point that focusing on getting cows pregnant efficiently and in a timely manner right now can also have a major and immediate economic impact on a dairy farm's profitability.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like the old adage of milk first, worry about fertility later is rapidly becoming an outdated and potentially costly way of thinking.
It really does seem that way.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there who are making these critical breeding decisions on a daily basis, what are some of the key actionable strategies they should be considering and perhaps reevaluating given these diverse international approaches and the insights we've discussed today? What practical advice can we offer them?
Well, having a solid understanding of these different evaluation systems and the underlying philosophies is going to be absolutely critical for making informed decisions that will impact the future profitability and efficiency of your dairy herd.
Gotta know the systems.
Based on what we've unpacked today, here are a few key actionable strategies to seriously consider. First, particularly with the recent and significant shift in the U.S. fertility index, it's now more important than ever to really audit and pay close attention to the cow conception rate, CCR, proofs of the sires you're considering using in your breeding program.
Check those CCR numbers.
That equal weighting with daughter pregnancy rate means CCR is now a much more influential factor in the overall fertility ranking. Second, given Germany's strong and enduring emphasis on non-return rates as a primary indicator of successful conception, it would be a wise move to compare both heifer and cow non-return rate proofs when you are evaluating sires, regardless of where those genetics originate.
Look at both NRR proofs.
This can give you valuable insights into the likelihood of achieving and maintaining pregnancies.
Okay.
And finally, taking a page from Canada's strategic playbook, don't overlook the potential impact of gestation length. If genomic data on gestation length is readily available for the sires you are considering, it's definitely worth paying attention to.
Ask for that gestation length data.
As even subtle differences in gestation length can have a significant indirect but positive impact on fertility through improved calving ease and reduced postpartum complications.
That's all incredibly valuable and practical advice for our listeners. And I think the overarching key takeaway for everyone is that while daughter pregnancy rate, DPR, has been a familiar and widely used metric for a long time.
Yep, the old standby.
Solely chasing high DPR bulls might not be the most effective or economically sound strategy moving forward, especially given its acknowledged limitations related to voluntary waiting periods and the recent shift in the U.S. index. A more balanced and nuanced approach is clearly needed.
Exactly. The most successful dairy breeders in the future will be those who take the time and make the effort to truly understand these different international approaches to fertility evaluation, recognize the inherent strengths and potential weaknesses of each,
Do the homework.
and then leverage that deeper knowledge to make more balanced, efficient, and ultimately more profitable breeding decisions that are best suited for their own unique herd management and operational goals.
Because at the end of the day, no matter how much milk a cow produces in her lifetime, if she can't reproduce efficiently and consistently, she's simply not going to be a sustainable and profitable part of your dairy operation in the long run.
Absolutely right.
That fundamental truth about the importance of efficient reproduction remains constant, regardless of which country's specific breeding philosophy we happen to be discussing.
Absolutely. Efficient reproduction is, without a doubt, the bedrock upon which a profitable and sustainable dairy farm is built.
So just to quickly recap some of those key takeaways for you, our listener, as you head back to the barn or the office, the U.S. has made a significant and fundamental shift in their fertility index, now equally prioritizing cow conception rate alongside better pregnancy rate.
The 40-40 split.
Really emphasizing the importance of getting those lactating cows pregnant in a timely and efficient manner. Germany, while maintaining a very strong and almost singular focus on achieving high conception rates and minimizing services, is increasingly recognizing the vital role that overall cow health plays as a foundational element for consistent and long-term reproductive success.
Health is key there now, too.
And Canada is taking a comprehensive and multifaceted approach, not only looking at direct fertility traits, but also strategically considering related factors like gestation length, which can indirectly but powerfully impact fertility through its influence on calving ease and subsequent pregnancy durability.
The holistic view.
Exactly.
And as you carefully consider your next crucial breeding decisions for your herd, this information really raises an important question for you to ponder. Are you primarily focused solely on how quickly a heifer reaches her first breeding and conceives?
Just the heifers.
Or are you also carefully factoring in how reliably your mature cows maintain their pregnancies, and even considering the more subtle but potentially significant influence of gestation length on both calving ease and their long-term reproductive success within your operation?
Think bigger picture.
The global landscape of Holstein fertility evaluation and breeding strategies is clearly evolving rapidly. Make absolutely sure that your own breeding program isn't inadvertently getting left behind in this dynamic and important area.
Definitely some important food for thought as you plan for the future of your herd. We strongly encourage you to delve deeper into the specific genetic evaluations that are available in your region and to really consider how these global trends and the insights we've discussed today might inform and enhance your own breeding strategies and decision-making processes.
Yeah, dig into your local data.
Don't hesitate to explore the valuable resources offered by your local Holstein associations and your trusted genetic providers. They are there to help you navigate this increasingly sophisticated and evolving landscape. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the fascinating world of Holstein fertility with us today.
And finally, let's address the elephant in the room, inbreeding. The April 2025 genetic base change has exposed how surging Holstein inbreeding is silently distorting PTAs. Expected future inbreeding EFI calculations now account for up to 18% of PTA changes. Holsteins are facing an average EFI of 9.4%, up from 7.5% in 2015, a stark reminder that unchecked genetic concentration can erode profitability over time. Breeders need to prioritize genomic relationship management and utilize mating programs that optimize both genetic gain and diversity.
Welcome back to the Bovine Newsroom. If you're tuning in, chances are you're a dairy farmer or, somewhere deep in the dairy industry.
That's right.
You've probably seen some buzz about the April 2025 genetic base change. Now, on the surface, it might seem like just another round of number shuffling, right?
Yeah, just the usual update.
But what the data you shared with us reveals is, well, it's more like a genetic shakeup, especially for our Holstein herds. And trust us, this isn't the kind of update you can just glance at while you're waiting for the parlor to finish.
That's right. This deep dive isn't just about rehashing the usual updates. What's fascinating here is the subtle but pretty significant way this base change is impacting your top Holstein genetics. If you're not digging into the details with us, you might miss some crucial shifts that could impact your herd's profitability in the coming years, almost like a hidden tax on your future milk checks.
A hidden tax, yeah. And that brings us to the real puzzle we want to crack for you today. We've been poring over the data you sent, and a real head-scratcher has emerged. Why are some of those, tried and true, traditionally high-ranking Holstein bulls showing smaller dips in their predicted transmitting abilities, their PTAs, for milk than we'd expect?
Right.
It's as if they've somehow sidestepped the full force of the downward adjustment. What's the inside scoop there?
Exactly. It's a bit of a genetic hoodoo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And that's precisely the kind of mystery we love to sink our teeth into here. Our mission in this deep dive is to really unravel the the underlying forces behind these PTA shifts.
Yeah.
We want to equip you with the knowledge and maybe more importantly, the practical strategies to navigate these changes for the long-term vitality and, well, profitability of your dairy operation.
We're talking about some sneaky genetic factors potentially at play, the surprisingly prominent role of inbreeding, and let's be frank, what it all boils down to for your bottom line. So let's dive straight into those headline numbers and the little curveball they've thrown our way.
Okay, so as expected, the average PTA drops for Holsteins were pretty substantial. Looking at the data you provided, we're seeing averages around 752 pounds of milk,
752, wow.
0.44 pounds of fat, and 29 pounds of protein disappearing in this update. And when you tally up the net merit, the average Holstein sire saw a drop of about $404.
$404. Yeah, those are not insignificant changes across the board, impacting nearly every Holstein in your tank.
Definitely not.
Absolutely. You see those averages and you think, right, okay, that's the new benchmark, time to adjust my targets. But then as we dig into the specifics in the material you shared, that's where things get. Well, let's just say they make you raise an eyebrow. Take Siegel Bay Super Sire ET, a real legend in the Holstein world, a bull many of you have likely used or have genetics tracing back to. His milk PTA did drop, sure, but only by 617 pounds from 978 down to 361.
And that's the crucial data point right there, isn't it?
It really is.
A missing 135 pounds, if you will, when you compare it to that 752-pound average drop we just mentioned. Now, it's vital for you to understand this isn't a data glitch or some kind of hiccup in the calculations.
Right.
This seemingly small discrepancy is actually a really telling sign of something fundamentally shifting within the Holstein genetic landscape. One of the articles you flagged even called it a canary in the coal mine for Holstein breeding.
A canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's almost like the genetic playing field has tilted slightly, and some bulls are navigating the change much more smoothly than others.
Exactly.
And to really put this Holstein situation into context for you, it's worth quickly looking at how other breeds fared in the same base change. Jerseys, for instance, saw considerably smaller average, drops around 355 pounds for milk.
Much smaller.
0.16 for fat, 14 for protein, and $179 for net merit. Brown Swiss, even less so, with 381 pounds for milk, just 9 for fat, 14 for protein, and $130 dip in net merit. This stark contrast really highlights that the magnitude of these adjustments is particularly pronounced in the Holstein breed, suggesting a Holstein-specific factor at play.
Exactly. These breed-specific differences, as highlighted in data you provided, are key. They indicate that whatever forces are at work here, they're exerting a much stronger influence on Holsteins compared to Jerseys and Brown Swiss.
Right.
And to truly grasp why Super Sire's numbers look the way they do and why Holsteins are experiencing these larger shifts overall, we need to delve into a concept called expected future inbreeding, or EFI.
EFI. Okay.
It's not exactly a household name, but it's becoming increasingly vital for you to understand.
EFI, it sounds a bit like something out of a genetic crystal ball, predicting the future of inbreeding in our herds. So let's break this down for you. What exactly is EFI, and why should you, as a dairy professional, be paying attention?
Well, think of EFI as a bull's genetic footprint extending into the future of your herd. It's a measure of how genetically similar that bull is to the current population of Holstein females. When you use a bull extensively, his genes become more widespread in the subsequent generations. EFI essentially estimates the level of inbreeding we can anticipate in his offspring if he were mated randomly across the breed. It's like measuring how much of his genetic shadow will fall across the future generations of your cows.
Okay, so it's not just about the inbreeding that might be present in a bull's pedigree now, but the potential for inbreeding that a particular bull carries and could contribute to in the future generations in your herd.
Precisely. And why does this matter to you?
Yeah.
Because inbreeding, as we know from, countless studies and practical experience, comes with some pretty significant economic downsides. We often call this inbreeding depression.
Right. Inbreeding depression.
It's like a subtle drain on your herd's potential.
Right. And we're not just talking about some abstract theoretical dip in performance, are we? The data you shared clearly shows there are real dollar and cents consequences for your operation.
Absolutely. For every 1% increase in the expected future inbreeding in your herd, research has consistently shown some tangible hits to production and profitability. We're talking about an average reduction of around 63.9 pounds in milk yield.
Wow, nearly 64 pounds.
Yeah. Net merit, that all-important economic index you rely on, can take a hit of about $25 per 1% increase in EFI.
Okay.
You also see decreases in fat and protein yield, ranging from 1.18 to 1.70 kilograms for fat and 0.90 to 1.45 kilograms for protein. And even seemingly small things like calving interval can be affected, potentially increasing by 0.19 to 0.34 days. These little percentages might seem minor on the surface, but they can really add up and erode profitability across your entire herd over time.
Wow. Those are some pretty compelling numbers. So EFI isn't just some, nerdy genetic exercise. It's directly tied to the financial health of your dairy operation.
Definitely.
So how does this EFI factor into the PTA calculations that you see for your bulls?
Well, the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, they actually incorporate EFI into their PTA calculations to account for this inbreeding depression. The formula looks something like this. PTA adjusted for EFI, or PTEFI, equals the original PTA, PTA 0, plus a factor B multiplied by the difference between the bull's EFI and the average EFI of the base population. That's EFI minus EFI base. Okay. That B factor is essentially a statistical measure that estimates the average impact of inbreeding on that specific trait within the population. It's their way of trying to give you a more accurate prediction of a bull's true genetic merit in the context of future inbreeding.
So this formula is attempting to give you a more realistic picture of a bull's transmitting ability by factoring in the potential drag that increased inbreeding in his offspring might cause.
Exactly. It's about predicting the genetic value he'll pass on to future generations, while also considering the likely increase in inbreeding that comes with using him. And this is precisely where the significant shift in the average relatedness of the Holstein population, as highlighted in the materials you shared, becomes so critical for your understanding of these PTA changes.
Which brings us to this Holstein relationship crisis, as one of the articles you sent over rather dramatically put it.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit over the top, maybe, but what's actually behind this rapid increase in relatedness within the breed that should concern you?
Well, what the data clearly shows is a significant acceleration in the average level of genetic relatedness among young Holstein animals between the 2015 and the 2020 base populations.
Okay.
The average expected future inbreeding in the 2015 born cows used as the base was around 7.5%. Fast forward just 5 years to the 2020 born cows that now form the new base, and that average EFI has jumped to a substantial 9.4%.
9.4%. Wow, that's a big jump.
That's a pretty remarkable increase in a relatively short period. Essentially, the new benchmark, the genetic makeup of the average Holstein animal, is already more inbred than the benchmark was just 5 years ago. Think of it like the average starting point for inbreeding has been significantly elevated.
And what's the driving force behind this rapid increase? It can't just be random, can it? What decisions have you and other breeders been making that are contributing to this?
No, not at all. The primary driver, and this is something many of you have participated in, has been the very intensive and frankly successful use of genomically tested elite sires.
Genomics.
Right. With the widespread adoption of genomic testing, you've been able to identify and heavily utilize young bulls with exceptional genetic potential very early in their lives. While this has undoubtedly accelerated genetic progress for many important traits in your herds.
Which is what we wanted.
Exactly. But it has also inadvertently led to a narrowing of the genetic base and a faster accumulation of inbreeding across the breed. When a few highly popular sires have a disproportionate number of offspring that then go on to become highly influential themselves, you inevitably see an increase in the average relatedness within the population.
Yeah.
It's a bit like putting all your genetic eggs in a very small, albeit high-performing basket.
Okay, that makes sense. So going back to our poster child for this discussion, Super Sire. How does this significant jump in the average EFI of the Holstein population explain his smaller than expected milk PTA drop that you might have noticed?
Well, this is the interesting part. Super Sire's individual EFI actually remained remarkably stable between the December 2024 and April 2025 evaluations, going from around 13.5% to 13.6%. Barely moved.
Okay, so he stayed about the same.
Right. However, as we've discussed, the average EFI of the base population took that significant leap from 7.5% up to 9.4%.
Right, the baseline changed.
Yes, exactly. Consequently, his inbreeding adjustment in the PTA calculation changed quite a bit. It went from negative 441 pounds of milk under the old base to negative 310 pounds under the new base.
Ah, I see. So even though Super Sire himself didn't become any less related to the population. The fact that the average Holstein is now carrying more similar genes means that the difference between his EFI and the population average has actually shrunk. Is that right?
Exactly. You nailed it. The inbreeding adjustment, as we explained with that formula, is based on that difference. Because Super Sire is now less of an outlier in terms of his EFI relative to the more inbred base population, the penalty applied to his PTA due to inbreeding is smaller.
Okay.
It's not that his inherent genetic merit for milk production suddenly declined less. It's that the inbreeding penalty being factored into his evaluation isn't as steep compared to the new, more inbred average. He's still considered relatively inbred, but the yardstick we measure him against has changed.
So, to really hammer this home for you listening, the inbreeding adjustments are now smaller relative to this more inbred base population. That's why we're observing this missing PTA drop in some heavily used bulls like Super Sire. It's not that their underlying genetic potential for milk production suddenly held steady. It's that the inbreeding penalty being applied to their evaluation isn't as severe when compared to the new, more inbred average Holstein.
Precisely. And this isn't a one-off phenomenon unique to Super Sire. It's highly likely affecting other widely used sires across the Holstein breed as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's a direct consequence of the rapid increase in Holstein inbreeding that's now reflected in this new genetic base. And as we pointed out earlier, this isn't impacting all breeds equally, which should give you pause for thought about the specific situation within the Holstein population.
Right. Let's briefly revisit that comparison of PTA drops across the different breeds. The numbers and the data you shared really do paint a clear picture. Holsteins experienced the most significant declines across the board: milk, fat, protein, and especially in net merit, with that substantial 404-meter average drop.
Big drop.
Meanwhile, Jerseys and Brown Swiss saw noticeably smaller adjustments. This should really underscore the specific challenges and considerations for those of you working primarily with Holstein herds.
And this difference truly emphasizes the point we've been making about inbreeding. The larger adjustments in Holsteins directly reflect the more intensive selection practices and, as a result, the higher rates of inbreeding within the Holstein population compared to Jerseys and Brown Swiss.
Right.
They're perhaps more conservative breeding approaches, maybe focusing a bit more on outcrosses historically, have likely helped them maintain a broader genetic base and avoid the same rapid surge in average relatedness that we're seeing in Holsteins. It's a clear illustration of the long-term consequences of the breeding decisions you and the broader industry make.
It's a stark reminder that the choices we make in breeding, particularly the intensity of selection and the level of reliance on, a few standout sires, have significant long-term ramifications for the genetic makeup and the overall resilience of the breed that so many of you depend on.
Absolutely.
Now, there was also a note in the materials you provided about a delay in the update for calving traits. What's the latest there, and what should you be aware of?
Yes, this is an important heads up for you. While the vast majority of traits have transitioned to the new 2020 genetic base with this April update, the evaluations for calving-related traits, specifically daughter calving-ease, sire calving-ease, daughter stillbirth, and sire stillbirth, will remain on the 2015 base until the August 2025 evaluation.
August. Okay, that's a bit out of sync with the rest of the traits, isn't it? What's the reason behind this temporary holdup that you should be aware of?
Apparently, the experts, the folks at CDCB, encountered some unexpected technical hurdles when attempting to apply the base updates to these particular traits. They're classified as phenotypically scaled traits.
Phenotypically scaled,
Yeah.
meaning?
Essentially, the way these traits are measured through observations and scoring of calving difficulty and stillbirth events by farmers like you created some unique complexities when trying to implement a broad population-wide shift like this base change. It's not as straightforward as adjusting the numbers for production traits based on direct measurements like pounds of milk or fat percentage.
Okay, so it's trickier to adjust the baseline for traits based on observation scores. So even though you and other producers have been diligently recording new data on calving ease and stillbirth since last December, that information is still being evaluated against the old 2015 baseline until August.
Correct.
That's a bit like using an old ruler to measure new growth, isn't it?
That's a very apt analogy. The new phenotypic data is indeed being incorporated, so the relative rankings of animals for these calving traits might still see some shifts between now and August.
Oh, okay.
However, the fundamental baseline for the evaluation remains the 2015 population. This means we're in a sort of transitional period for these specific traits. And it's something you will need to keep in mind when making breeding decisions in the coming months.
Right.
We'll essentially have another set of adjustments to selection criteria coming down the pipeline later this year when the calving traits finally make the jump to the 2020 base in August. So stay tuned for that second wave of adjustments.
Okay, so we've laid out the situation based on the information you shared. The unexpected PTA shifts, the critical role of EFI, the accelerating inbreeding within the Holstein breed, and this temporary delay for calving trait updates. Now, what are the concrete practical steps that you, as dairy producers, need to take to effectively navigate this evolving genetic landscape and protect your herd's future? What's the actionable strategy here for your farm?
Okay, good question. The first and perhaps most critical step for you is to recalibrate your sire selection thresholds.
Recalibrate thresholds.
Right. If you've been relying on absolute net merit values as your primary benchmark for choosing bulls, you might need to adjust those targets upwards. Or, perhaps better put, adjust your expectations downwards.
Okay. How so?
For example, if you were consistently aiming for bulls above, say, plus 2,000 NML under the old base, you might now need to be looking at bulls closer to plus $1,600 NM bill to achieve a similar level of genetic merit relative to the new lower population average.
Okay. So a $1,600 bull now might be comparable to a $2,000 bull before, relatively speaking.
Exactly. It's about adjusting your expectations to the new reality. The average moved, so your target relative to that average needs consideration.
So it's not that the bulls themselves have suddenly become genetically inferior, it's that the overall average of the breed has shifted, and therefore your targets need to shift accordingly.
Precisely. The average has moved, so your benchmarks need to move with it. Secondly, it's more vital than ever for you to focus on the relative rankings of bulls rather than just fixating on absolute PTA values.
Focus on rankings. Okay.
When you're comparing bulls within the same evaluation, run the same CDCB. Update their positions relative to each other are more meaningful than their absolute numbers. Don't get overly caught up in trying to hit specific PTA thresholds you were using before. Focus on identifying the top-performing bulls within the current evaluation. Who's leading the pack now?
That makes perfect sense. It's about identifying the leaders in the current pack, even if the numbers across the board have experienced a bit of a downward adjustment.
Right.
And then we absolutely must address inbreeding management. It sounds like this is no longer something that Holstein breeders can afford to, put on the back burner. It needs to be a proactive part of your breeding strategy.
You're absolutely right. Given the clear acceleration of inbreeding within the Holstein breed, as evidenced by the data you provided, proactive inbreeding management is now essential for you to safeguard the long-term profitability and health of your herd.
Okay, so what does that look like practically?
This involves a few key actions. Firstly, make it a routine practice to actively monitor the expected future inbreeding EFI values when you're selecting sires. Don't stop at just looking at the headline PTAs. Delve into the detailed genetic information and carefully consider the potential inbreeding implications of each sire you consider using.
Right. Look beyond net merit and milk PTAs to that EFI number. And what should you, as a dairy producer, be looking for in terms of EFI? Lower is generally considered better in this context, isn't it?
Generally speaking, yes. Lower EFI suggests a bull is less related to the current female population, which can help slow inbreeding accumulation. So you should actively consider incorporating outcross sires into your breeding program.
Outcrosses. Bulls less related to the mainstream.
Exactly. These are bulls that have lower levels of genetic relationship to the broader Holstein population. These bulls can be valuable for introducing new genetic diversity into your herd and helping to slow down the rate at which inbreeding accumulates. Furthermore, if you're not already utilizing them, now is the time to seriously consider implementing formalized mating programs and leveraging the available mating software tools.
Mating programs, yeah.
These resources can help you strategically optimize for both continued genetic gain in the traits that matter most to you and effective control of inbreeding, ensuring that you're not inadvertently breeding away your future profits through increased genetic relatedness.
So it's about taking a more strategic and, data-informed approach to your mating decisions, going beyond simply chasing the highest PTA figures.
Precisely. It's a delicate balancing act. You want to continue to drive genetic progress in your herd, but you also need to be keenly aware of and actively manage the long-term consequences of increasing inbreeding.
Okay.
And finally, just a quick reminder for you about those calving traits. Be prepared for another set of adjustments in August, when those evaluations finally transition to the 2020 base. Keep an eye out for updates from the CDCB and be ready to reassess your selection criteria for calving ease and stillbirth at that time.
Right. Don't forget August.
It's like a two-stage adjustment process this year.
Okay. So to bring it all together, this April 2025 genetic base change isn't just another routine update in the dairy world. The data you shared clearly highlights both the impressive genetic progress we've collectively made
For sure.
and the growing and frankly significant impact of inbreeding within the Holstein breed. This situation demands a proactive, informed, and thoughtful shift in your breeding strategies to ensure continued profitability and the long-term health of your herds.
Absolutely. Understanding the power of EFI and actively managing inbreeding are no longer optional considerations. They are now absolutely crucial components of maintaining a profitable and sustainable dairy operation, particularly for those of you working with Holstein genetics. Ignoring these factors is, well, it's akin to leaving money on the table year after year.
It really underscores the need to strike that balance, doesn't it? Continuing to push for genetic advancement in the traits that matter most to your farm while diligently controlling the creeping effects of inbreeding.
That's the challenge.
Because as one of the sources you sent so memorably put it, genetic progress without inbreeding control is like milking three-legged cows. Eventually, the whole operation goes lame.
Yeah.
A slightly humorous but ultimately very sobering thought for all of you to consider.
Indeed. So, for all of you who have tuned in today, our challenge to you is this. Take some dedicated time, maybe this week, to review the EFI values of the sires you're currently using or considering for your breeding program.
Look up those numbers.
Yeah. Critically think about how your current mating strategies might need to evolve and adapt in light of this new genetic reckoning, as we called it earlier. You might find it beneficial to explore some of the sophisticated mating software options that are available, or even consider consulting with a knowledgeable genetic advisor to delve deeper into what these changes mean specifically for your individual herd.
Excellent advice. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the April 2025 genetic base change. We sincerely hope this discussion, based on the information you provided, has given you a clearer understanding of the underlying forces at play and some concrete, actionable steps that you can take to navigate these important industry shifts. For more in-depth analysis and the latest news impacting your dairy business, be sure to visit us at thebullvine.com. Until our next deep dive, take care.
That wraps up this week's recap of genetic evaluation highlights. From recalibrated rankings to fertility breakthroughs and inbreeding alarms, it's clear that dairy genetics are evolving faster than ever, and breeders must stay ahead of the curve. Thank you for tuning in to the Bullvine podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into dairy genetics and industry trends every week. And as always, keep milking those opportunities.